Greetings from Castle Goring, from Mickey, Aurora, and from me. We wish you a very, very, very happy 2025 again. And we are going to plunge in. I have had lots of bongo drums beating and very mixed messages. And I am going to cover what I have been privy to. The mischief makers get up to. Just unbelievable. So we will start with QPR, who says, Lady C, what do you make of Meghan returning to Instagram? Isn't it wonderful? Oh, I have been waiting my whole life for the most wonderful, marvelous thing to happen. Meghan is on Instagram again, notwithstanding the fact that she is possibly seriously deflecting. Naughty me to actually suspect that Meghan could ever do anything underhand. No, never. Not Meghan, that absolute beacon of integrity and straightforwardness. Okay, well, here's the deal. Their lives are in a mess. Evidently, their relationship is in a mess. She is desperately clutching at straws to hope that she's not going to sink into the oblivion whence she came. Harry is reported to have been behind the camera. No photographs of Harry behind the camera. And Harry wouldn't be denying that he wasn't behind the camera. Also, when was it filmed? There is Meghan in white to show that she's still a virgin. That woman, the Virgin Mary, she thought she was so clever. She popped out one virgin birth. Well, I've popped out two. Doorbell rings. Delivery from DHL. Yes. Meghan is having all sorts of interesting deliveries, not the least of which is the delivery of her return to Instagram. Well, she primed her public, who have been waiting with such bated breath that they've run out of breath. 2 years ago, when she had that interview with The Cut, do you remember? The interview that resulted in the journalist, whose name I think was Phillips, if my memory serves me correctly, being forced to go on pretty much indefinite leave because she had the unmitigated goal to quote Meghan accurately and make Meghan look like the fool that she really is. Well, she writes 2025 in the sand. Oh, and she even forgot to do a curly cue. Oh, so natural all of a sudden to cock tea. Cock fingers and tape tea. I'm being facetious for a purpose. I hope you understand how ridiculous this whole thing is. Because that could have been filmed any time. It didn't have to have been filmed to coincide with the new year. Anybody could have been behind the camera. Of course, she has reported that Harry was behind the camera. But was Harry really behind the camera? Because there's been another little plant which has been Harry at the fake surf scene with a gentleman and a young girl and a child that is possibly Archie and has been identified as Archie and Harry. Is that AI? Is that genuine? Do pigs fly? Do they really fly? Well, I tell you what I've been told as well, and I'm not sure I believe any of this either, that Harry has been at Bagshot Park with his uncle Edward and his aunt Sophie. Now, those of you who remember the late Queen's funeral will remember Sophie being driven in the same car as Meghan, looking well away and a face of thunder, because, of course, Sophie loved the late Queen, and the late Queen loved Sophie. And you really don't think, do you, that Sophie would have any sympathy whatsoever for anybody who caused the Queen the tremendous suffering that Meghan did, that spurned her invitation to go up to Balmoral and take the children just a day or two before the Queen died. And I said at the time that my information had been that rooms had been prepared for Harry, Meghan, and the children at Balmoral that summer in the hope that they would come, but they were too busy. Well, I mean, why would I go and see that old woman? I mean, I'm a proud, confident woman of colour and a star of Suits, and there's no way I'm going to go up to Balmoral. I mean, why would I go to Balmoral? I mean, it's too common for me. I mean, I'm too precious. So, there is some plausibility to the fact that if the marriage is in huge trouble, which it is supposed to be, depending on whom you believe, that Harry could well have sought refuge at Bagshot Park with his uncle Edward and Aunt Sophie, who will be giving him words of wisdom. But is that true, or is that another plant to make anybody who would say it as a statement of fact look ridiculous? Or are the plants, the 2025, which could have been done on the 31st of December, or the 30th of December when Harry was supposed to be at Bagshot Park. Look, H took that photograph and that filmed me as well. And nothing's wrong with our marriage. We're very happy. We're Romeo and Juliet, Abelard and Eloise, Mud and Jeff, Armpit and Deodorant, Batty and Bench. That's what we are. So, then, of course, to prove that Harry was present in California when he wasn't, there was a photograph released of Harry on the jet ski with Archie. So, my goodness, Archie Bunker exists off Cinefilm. And he even looks different from what he used to look at when he was a star of a television series. Do you begin to see how well, I don't know about you, but I'm sick to my back teeth of the antics. So, I think I've managed to get that point across. So now we go on to something that's equally bizarre. Ophelia says, Lady C, I think you have commented on the Blake Lively Baldoni case. But there seems to be a new development this morning. He is suing the New York Times for defamation. He also seems to have some texts showing she asked him to go to her trailer. Is this the new Depp Heard case? Well, it can't be the new Depp Heard case because Justin Baldoni is not married to Blake Lively. However, Justin Baldoni has accused Blake Lively and her husband, Ryan Reynolds, of effectively entrapping him in a meeting that he and several other people turned up to expecting apples and not only got oranges, they got worse, they got sour lemons. And according to him, Ryan Reynolds berated him in a heated interview in a New York penthouse, stating that he had committed various offences, chief of which was fat shaming his wife, Blake Lively. Now, I don't know how many of you are old enough to remember Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor. And if you look at Cleopatra, you can see her weight fluctuating wildly. I'm sorry, I used to be a model, and I know as a fact that it is your professional duty when you are selling your appearance as well as your performing skills that you perform and your appearance accords with what is expected. Fat shaming is one of the latest things that women come up with to say that men are being unreasonable. Well, I'm sorry, continuity is very important in films. And if in one half of the scene you are a stone lighter than another half of the scene, it's a no-no. That's not fat shaming, that's professionalism. But interesting that Justin Baldoni is saying that one of the main things that Ryan Reynolds had against him as the director and the other executives on the film was that they were complaining about Blake Lively's weight. Well, if it was fluctuating, they had a valid reason to complain. You know, if you are going to go to a brain surgeon, you don't expect to get a podiatrist. It's as simple as that. And if a movie star is being paid good money, he or she is supposed to honor his or her end of the bargain. And if he or she doesn't, he or she should be called to order. And all this emotional manipulation that goes on nowadays, where somebody was fat shamed, somebody was this, somebody was that. Perfectly reasonable professional expectations that are failed to be met, and then people complain about it. Well, let us see what happens in the case. Because for Justin Baldoni to sue for defamation, he has to prove malice. And it seems to be shaping up to be a very interesting case, because what I hear from my bongo drums is that in fact he wanted to focus on a truly significant problem that the movie covered, which is since this is YouTube, I have to be gentle. The disregard that certain men have for women in certain relationships to the detriment of the woman's well-being, where she is being misused. Let's use that word. The prefix, of course, shouldn't be miss, it should be a, but we'll stick to miss for this moment. And she wanted to make it lighter and more appealing and more glamorous. Well, I'm afraid that relationships that have elements of abusiveness in them are anything but glamorous. And why would you not focus on that if that is the underlying message? Maybe because you just want to be appealing. It will be interesting to see who's at fault and who isn't. But this is certainly shaping up to be a very nasty matter. And both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are fighting for their professional lives, and only one of them is going to win. She has gotten the first punch, offence being the best form of defence. She has sued him long after the expected time for suing him, long after the movie has been proven to be a success, long after she has survived and flourished. So any damage that was done to her has been negligible, if any damage was done at all. While, of course, the damage done to him could prove to be fatal to his career. Let's see, because Ryan Reynolds is a huge deal in Hollywood, a far bigger deal than either Blake Lively or Justin Baldoni. It's always interesting as well to see how the functionaries in Hollywood always go with what they regard as the flavor of the week. Let's see what happens there. Pat Egan says, maybe the Sussex squad have gone quiet because they're not getting paid anymore. You're onto something, evidently. Evidently, the Sussex squad has gone very quiet because they aren't getting paid anymore to the extent that they used to be. Now, I wonder who was paying them. I don't think I even need to answer that question. I think we all know the answer. Oh dear, does that mean that they're running out of money? One tear left eye. One tear left eye. RGW says, Lady C, I was just reading that Charles Spencer has spoken of his wife Karen's quote-unquote absurd attempt to blacken my name! Exclamation marks. I think 3 wives, 4 engagements, and his new partner, of which we know, he may have somewhat blackened his name himself. What do you think? My experience of Charles Spencer when he was young was that the guy was a jerk. And I have seen no evidence to alter that opinion. And I think it is deeply unsavory for a man to dishonor the mother of his child, of his daughter, and to have taken all her effort and her money the way he has done, and just discarded her. And she fought for her marriage. Well, she's discovered what I discovered in 80 something, and plenty of other people have discovered since, Charles Spencer is a habit best left untended. According to him, she's trying to blacken his name. Charles Spencer's name looks like a coal miner before a bath after a full day down the mines. He is a fine historian. He is a competent writer. There are also other things that I could say that would get me into legal trouble, so I won't say what else I have been told he is. But let me put it this way. If Charles Spencer were the last man on earth, I would sooner go into a banana field than give him 1 minute of my time. Not, of course, for a second saying that Charles Spencer would desire me, but I'm just saying, repellent. He is to me as repellent as Tacky Theodoracopulus. The things I have heard about Charles Spencer, less said the better. Let's leave it at that. I wish his wife, Karen, all the luck in the world, and she's going to need it. She is definitely going to need it. But she's a lot of time and effort down, and the way he has gone about discarding her, I mean, he has discarded his women in the most ignominious way. That, to me, does not signify, shall we say, behavior that I would regard as admirable. Let's leave it at that. But Cat Jarman's husband also is featuring in it now. And it's really interesting because Cat Jarman doesn't have a leg to stand on. The fact that she had multiple sclerosis and has now made sure that everybody in the world knows that she has it. Because Karen Spencer only made Charles Spencer aware of the fact that she had it. Because, of course, Karen Spencer has now lived with Charles Spencer long enough to know what she's dealing with. But Charles Spencer is so cussed, he might actually spin this out just to prove that he loves Cat Jarman just as she is. But I'm not a betting woman, but I think I'd put good money on the fact that it will be very surprising if he marries her. And Cat Jarman has said that the stress of the lawsuit she has chosen to bring is injurious to her health, because stress is a problem when you are suffering from multiple sclerosis. I would have thought the stress of an adulterous relationship, the stress of running off with somebody who is so well known as what he is, as Charles Spencer, the stress of damaging your poor husband emotionally as you embark on an adulterous affair. Oh, none of that counts, of course. It's the fact that Karen Spencer told Charles Spencer that she has multiple sclerosis. That's their main complaint. Well, sweetie pie, your medical records are not confidential when someone close to you, and I'm not mentioning her husband's name, no, I'm not, tells the wife of the woman that the husband is having an affair with, that, oh, actually, she has multiple sclerosis. I feel sorry for her having multiple sclerosis. But does she think we're stupid? Does she think that anybody is going to be stupid enough to believe that she has piled the pressure on and Karen Spencer is the one who's responsible? Seems to me she's making absolutely damn sure that she ties Charles Spencer up in so many knots that he's gonna have to marry her. Oh dear, do we detect a bit of marital ambition there somewhere? I wonder. I couldn't be cynical, could I? Or maybe just worldly wise. Anna Baker says, Dear Lady C, do you think that Harry is deliberately going for broke with his court cases? He seems to be gambling his whole fortune on the successes of these cases, which is totally irrational thinking. In the event of a loss, does he think in some twisted way that the king will finally take notice of him and have to bail him out to save the monarchy of the embarrassment of it all? This would be Harry's final payback and revenge against his father because of his own perceived victimhood of not being the firstborn. I would value your thoughts on this matter. Wishing you, your family, and the fur baby's blessings for 2025. Anna Baker. Very interesting interpretation that you have. I really gave up trying to figure out drug-addled people's way of thinking a long time ago. And your interpretation is perfectly possible because drug-addled people don't think logically or rationally. They think illogically and irrationally, but it all makes sense in a crazy sort of way. The question isn't would he be effectively wiping himself out financially and expecting his father to come to his rescue, as would his father come to his rescue? Oh dear, oh dear. Do I see many white coats coming in? Oh, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Nancy Lopez says, Lady C, herein lies the question. This morning you said, prove the eggs came from her while discussing the legitimacy of Archie. Unfortunately, even you, one of the first messengers of the surrogacy scandal, are now beginning to accept the legitimacy of a surrogate baby. I'm not. Surrogacy is a wonderful blessing for parents unable to conceive and carry a baby to full term. I couldn't agree more. My family has 2 IVF babies. They are loved beyond measure. I don't think IVF babies are the same as surrogates. However, I'm not going to quibble. Unfortunately, Archie, whoever he is, was conceived, carried, and delivered with lies. And because people are tiring of the story, have begun to accept and legitimize the lie, because it includes the term surrogacy. The monarchy, the British people, Parliament were never given a chance to amend the laws of succession. Well, I have not changed my stance, and I don't intend to change it. I am very much in favour of surrogacy as and when it is appropriate, and I am in favour of people respecting the law and people not perpetrating frauds upon the public. Not for a second accusing Meghan and Harry of doing that. But anybody who has a baby by surrogacy and claims to have given birth to it herself would indeed be perpetrating a fraud upon the public. Now, if somebody wants to do it privately, that has no real consequences. But if somebody wants to do it publicly, that's another matter altogether. Meghan and Harry have made it absolutely clear that they stand by their version of the story, which is that Meghan gave birth to Archie and to Lily. I don't know about you, I'm heartily fed up with the whole thing. And I think had they used the services of a surrogate, it would have been a wonderful opportunity to validate the usage of surrogacy the way the Danish Prince of Wittgenstein did, Princess Benedicta's son and his wife. So there are criticisms to be made of the way Harry and Meghan have gone about things, because whether those children were born by a surrogate or born by her, they have so muddied the waters that they have introduced speculation which has gone on for far too long and is extremely damaging to the royal family's reputation, really. And it's also an insult to the people of this country. Actually, it's an insult to everybody who has to listen to it. But let's leave it at that, beyond my saying that I am not accepting the legitimacy of any child passed off as non-surrogate that is surrogate in this country. There are valid ways of going about things and correct ways of going about things. And I don't think that claiming to bear a child that you didn't bear is one of them. And I leave it at that. Not for a second suggesting for a moment, for legal reasons, that Harry and Meghan would actually have perpetrated a fraud upon not only the British people, the whole world. That degree of brass neck would truly be unbelievable, wouldn't it? Scott Garver says, isn't it time to reinstate the archaic tradition of the Home Secretary being present in the room for all babies born with or whom may achieve the HRH? Well, he actually he didn't have to be in the room, but he had to be on the premises. And it had to be clear that the woman giving birth was the royal woman. So, and yes, it should be reinstated. Absolutely. It was stopped in 1936 after Princess Alexandra's death because no one could ever have imagined that any member of the royal family would be ill-advised enough to marry somebody whose conduct was so questionable that valid questions would arise as to the carriage of the baby. And it should be reinstated. It was done for a sound reason in 1689, and the reason remains sound. And if anything, the whole palaver around the birth of those children shows to what extent it remains relevant even now. Saroya Shepherdson says, if Buckingham Palace was misled about Archie's birth, etc., why are they not clarifying all this now? I don't understand. Why is the monarchy not addressing the legitimacy of the two children for the line of succession? This is all crazy and treacherous. It's very, very ostrich, but the royal family has always been ostrich. And the royal family buries its head in the sand and always has, in the hope that things will blow over if they're awkward. And only at the 99th hour, when they absolutely have to deal with anything, will they deal with it. This has been their custom, and it's a tradition, and it's a tradition that has paid them off handsomely over these decades, in fact, over the centuries. Just ignore, and finally, hopefully, the problem will go away, and it often does. This one, I don't think is going anywhere anytime soon. However, they're not going to be doing anything either because they can't by law. As long as they are a royal family of a constitutional monarchy, they have to abide by the law, and they have to respect the legal rights of the people whose conduct is being questioned. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. Harry and Meghan have legal rights. If you can't prove that they conned the world into believing that she gave birth to those children, you have to prove it. And if you can't prove it, they have an absolute right under the law to have their privacy and all the safeguards that the law put in place to protect each of us protected. It's what you call a Mexican standoff legally. I personally think the whole thing is so simply resolved. Just provide proof that has always been provided for every other royal birth, that those two children were properly birthed, and the problem goes away. And there is no valid reason for not doing that, because it's been done every single time from 1689 to the present, except in the birth of those two children. And Janice Kelly says, did you and Trump attend the same parties when you lived in New York? No. My New York heyday was the late 60s into the mid 70s. Trump was young. I've been to many parties where Ivana was present. I even went to Ivana's engagement party to Riccardo Mazzucchelli at Zion House, which was organized by Liz Brewer, who is one of the doyens of what used to be called high society in the United Kingdom. And I knew Ivana, and I used to go to parties at her and Riccardo Mazzucchelli's, because I'd known Riccardo before they got together as well, and I've known Liz for over 50 years. So, but this would have been in the 80s or 90s, 80s and 90s anyway, whenever it was, late 80s, 90s, whatever. But when I lived in New York was very different socially from what it is now. There was WASP society, and there was, the two people who ran New York's social life were Serge Obolensky, who was a Russian prince who had been married to Tsar Alexander II's daughter, then married one of the Astors, and he used to basically run New York's WASP society. And Bob Taplinger, who had been the head of PR, whatever it was called in those days, at one of the big movie studios, moved to New York, and he did what was effectively the Entertainment Society and the Writers and Jewish Society, which in those days were quite separate. There was not much crossover between Jewish society and WASP society. Now it's all amalgamated, and nowadays it's quite different from what it was. In those days, things, as I say, were far more divisive, really. And the Trumps weren't grand enough to be members of either society at the time. They might have had money, but even to be a member of the, say, Bob Taplinger set, or you had to be a movie star, or you had to be very rich, and it was so society is very different now. I don't think it's even called society. I think it's just called social life. And it's far freer and more flexible now. So, no, I didn't attend the same parties as Donald Trump. So I hope that answers the question. But I have been to Mar-a-Lago. I love Mar-a-Lago. I think it's heaven on earth. But then it was Marjorie Merriweather Post's creation. And it's wonderful. And Trump has done a wonderful job of restoring it. And I mean, so I hope that answers the question. And on that note, I'll say thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been of some interest to you. If it has, please keep the questions and comments coming in so I will know what you would like us to be speaking about. Okay, thank you so much. Take good care. And again, happy 2025. And if you have truly enjoyed this, would you care to like, share, subscribe, press the notification bell, and Godspeed. Bye-bye.